Hello, and welcome to another fully live and untamed episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher and sometimes producer at Varonis. And today I'm going to be taking your hacking questions and giving you the best answers I can while also going over some cool hacking games. I've been running the stream now for a while, and it's all kind of been held together by one thing, and that is this laptop. Now, as some of you might have noticed on my Twitter, and a lot of people were really distraught as I was when this happened, but unfortunately, my computer is in a coma and it is not able to be with us on the stream tonight. A lot of people have expressed their condolences. I will say it is not completely dead yet. There is some hope that perhaps it can be revived. Um, but yeah, it's very sad when we have an important part of this production team pass. So this computer has been to a lot of crazy places. It has a lot of probably all sorts of malware on it. You know, like as a researcher, you run a lot of stuff on that you find on GitHub. But it is a collection of stickers that is going to be hard to replace. And a lot of the places that are represented on here actually reached out on Twitter. So it was just kind of nice to see the community rallying around a fallen computer. So if you were there mourning the loss of our computer, then thank you very much. I miss this computer very much. Hopefully it will be back at some point, but we'll see. So I also wanted to just always mention some projects that I'm working on, and one of them is testing out some of the new AI integration. So as James was talking about in our chat, hi James. There's all sorts of integrations going on with ChatGPT and other AI, and it's going varying levels of well. James tried Bard, as did I, and I can confirm, it is awful. It is really bad. I found Llama to be more fun and Alpaca to be more fun to play with than this. So pretty amazing. And I was making slides at 2 a.m, and it was just like taking it from ChatGPT 4, like, you know, the individual slides, because it was just like formatting it for me and stuff. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I standing in the middle of this process? And I see their business is now springing up around answering that question. And it is shocking to me that, so I went and I looked, and it turns out that yes, Google does in fact have this capability, but it's just for trusted users. So it's very strange right now because there are a lot of things you would expect to have these advanced AI integrations already, and they simply don't. And then there's also some things that are just popping up as intermediary businesses that seem to just string everything together in ways that are much more useful. So pretty crazy. It's a very strange time. So what I was kind of encountering was also AI image generation with Bing. So I had a friend who was doing a drawing competition where each month you kind of pick someone or a prompt and then draw something off of it. So he chose to represent like a rural gas station worker with the name of Crystal, and Crystal was the prompt. So I wanted to see if Bing and its new native like AI image generation could actually kind of recreate this from the right prompt. And I think it actually, I think it, I think it did an okay job. It can't really do words, so all of them ended up just saying a bunch of like edgy gibberish. But it did a pretty good job. So I asked it to do a couple variations, and all of a sudden it took her price gun and turned it into a literal gun, and that's where things kind of started getting scary. But this is still pretty cool that it can take an art style or an image and verbally kind of describe it. And what's happening is eventually you're able to use these tools together to take an image, have one AI look at it and describe it for the other AI, and then iteratively make it better and better and closer to that style. So I was impressed by what I could do with Bing's new integration. It's really crazy how these AI integrations are spreading everywhere. I knew that I've kind of stopped Google searching things. I started using Bing first to kind of I'm kind of describing it to like self-checkout. It's like I can either have like Bing tally everything up for me and hand me the receipt and then have me just look at that, or I can do my own checkout with Google where I'm like checking every individual thing and typing. It's really a totally different experience. So I guess it really depends if you like self-checkout or if you like having something check out for you. But for me, if I'm in a hurry, if the line's open and someone's fast on the checkout register, like I tend to find I kind of prefer it. So seeing that AI image generation is now supported is pretty interesting. But in testing it, this is not like a phishing thing that I would be worried about. I would say, though, that it could create pretty convincing like logos and other things based off a specific style. So this now seems to be out there. You don't need to go to DALL-E anymore in order to get this sort of basic thing just in your browser. It's built into, I'm temporarily using this Windows computer, and it's built into it, which is pretty funny. Yeah, so it's a pretty wild time for AI, and it's always interesting to note that this is spreading so quickly that we're seeing these AI tools pop up in useful ways kind of all over the place. So yeah, just little research that I've been doing over the weekend. So we've got tons of news to go over on Friday. But yeah, okay. So Jacob is saying that we should start a Discord server. I've been wrestling with this for a while, and I feel like it's probably maybe time to actually create a Discord server and maintain it. The problem is the reason why I don't. Oh, I'm in control, right? The reason why I haven't made a Discord server before is because it's really difficult to like build a community without a goal, you know? So like just creating one around it like tends to involve people who don't really know what it's about. Like having a specific stated goal is really the only way to maintain like a good Discord community. So I'm definitely open to the idea. I think that it would be really good for people who have come from Nullbyte, who have come from Hack5 and want to see, you know, us on the stream or have the opportunity to ask questions, or if they end up like having a question later, be able to have maybe some people who can answer it better than I can jump in and help out. That's what I kind of see a Discord community for being useful. And actually, now that I think that there are some people I would definitely make moderators on that who are very active on the show. So all right, you might have sold me on it. Like I might make one, just like an outside Discord server for just everybody who's come from all those tutorial channels and stuff. Because I realized that that's something I've never done. I made a lot of Discord servers back when I did student leadership groups in college, and I found them to be exhausting to run without administrators. But there's a lot of very active people in not only like this show, but also in the community. So I think that might actually be a good idea. Yeah, JR says there's no need for a Discord server. I agree. Like basically my position is, well, I don't necessarily agree. My position is if there's no need for a Discord server, don't make one. Just because I've seen so many become just like kind of like toxic and nasty and like gatekeepy or just like very useless where people just don't engage very much. And I would rather have like a mission that people are getting a lot of value out of for a Discord server than just pop one up because, you know, people are around the videos. You know, I would want to make sure that like people are really getting value out of it so that when we do something, people are paying attention, because the worst thing is just having a Discord server with a bunch of lurkers that never gets updated. It's just like another one for you to ignore, you know? Like you really want to get something out of those Discord servers. So I've been thinking about it for a while. Might be a good time, but I agree. The reason I haven't done it before is I just frankly haven't seen like a use for it, and I hate those zombie Discord servers that like don't actually provide much value or like don't give you an answer in a good period of time. But yeah, I agree. I can't answer all these questions because sometimes like sometimes I don't have the experience. Like I've done some pen testing, solicited and semi-solicited, you know, like where I'm just like, hey, like there's a problem with your business. Like for free, I'll tell you. But I don't do it regularly enough that I can give you advice on like reporting or like specific tools, because I've been in like kind of the more education sphere for a while now, and I try to keep fresh with things, and I have my focuses of OSINT and Wi-Fi, but there are some general things like Metasploit that I haven't touched in like 3 years. So if you want me to tell you how the newest Metasploit module works, somebody in our community probably knows, like almost guaranteed. But yeah, that's something that is definitely something that I wanted to think out beforehand, but I'm very strongly leaning towards making a Discord server, just because of what you guys have said, and also because I've kind of been having that feeling for a while. So, all right. So another person is just shouting out Nullbyte. So you want to hear some dirt on Nullbyte? So the Nullbyte channel is part of the Wonder How To Network, which was recently purchased by another company that shall go unnamed. So the Nullbyte channel was the biggest pain to produce. I had to recruit hackers. I had to get them set up on video equipment. I had to like schedule the show and have a showrunner. I had to like destroy a relationship between like me and like my closest friend who did like video production work to get that off the ground. Not destroy. We're still friends, but still, it was exhausting. It takes a lot of specialized knowledge, and also just being like straight up and honest about what you're presenting and never wrong. That's the problem. Like doing hacking tutorials is a very sensitive subject, and you have to have both like a good understanding for what is too far and what is too offensive. And also you need to have the ability to make the stuff fun and interesting, because it is inherently very dry. That's why people like Nullbyte. Like they don't know where to get started, and like Nullbyte is a great place to get started on specific projects that let you feel like you've accomplished something and that you've taken a step in the right direction. Great, right? So it seems like rather than a lot of people have been saying that we should buy Nullbyte and we should like refurbish it and revamp it. It looks like they are going to try to do it themselves. So you might see some very strange content on the Nullbyte channel in the next couple of months, perhaps. I have no idea, but I have been informed that it's like changed hands, and I've like kind of taken a look at who does it, and they seem like good people. They're like an ad placement network. They have a lot of like property like in that area. But yeah, so if you're a Nullbyte fan, you might start seeing really weird, totally unrelated videos in the future. Who knows? I don't know. I've kind of like hit them up and been like, hey, like I can definitely make this channel come to life again, but like I'm not going to be working for like another company that like ends up not wanting to support it anymore because it's like a weird channel, and like we get content strikes all the time. We were in the news 3 times because people kept taking down our videos. Like cybersecurity content is like super hard to make. That's what we learned at Nullbyte, and we became really good specialists at it. So seeing how a company that mostly deals with like other types of content, like deals with this highly specific hacker stuff, the hacker community, like you can't be wrong when you're teaching stuff, and you can't be too dry or boring or people really lose interest. It's like, it's super hard to do. So we'll see how they do. But if you see weird content on Nullbyte, that might be why. So if you're a Nullbyte fan, brace yourself. Who knows what's coming up next? All right, so one thing that I wanted to also shout out is games. So I've been talking about how useful games are in cybersecurity for like CTFs or like other things to make, oh, that's so small. Let's make this bigger. For just getting people to have a starting place and also a way of engaging more than one person. So when I did my class recently in Missoula, I got to talk to some people who are part of the local MS-DOS club, which is their cybersecurity club. Very clever. I'm a big fan of that. And one of the things that I used to struggle with when I was doing the same thing as they are, trying to organize people around cybersecurity, is having games that people can play that are accessible, that teach interesting, relevant skills, and that also are like possible to pull off with like increasingly large groups of people. So we started out by doing, so this is my friend Brandon and I, who's now an engineer at Google, both went to Pasadena City College, and we organized a bunch of games for like student organizations to try to just drum up interest in cybersecurity and also get funding from like the business development department and stuff to get prizes and other things to just get people excited. So we actually had the chief information security officer of the city of Santa Monica come in and teach all of our students Linux so that they could use some of the basic like network capturing tools. And then we made a series of games for them to try out. And the most complicated, craziest, best one is the Chicken Man game. So I'll go through a couple different games that you can play if you're a beginner and you want to get started in cybersecurity doing both either microcontroller stuff or Wi-Fi hacking stuff. These games are really fun, and we put a lot of work into them, almost crazily so. So what do you need to play the Chicken Man game? Well, you need at least 2 Raspberry Pi computers that have a wireless network adapter that's compatible, with Kali Linux. Easy. Almost every Raspberry Pi is. You need like a screen, obviously a keyboard. It's command line only. And then you need at least two microcontrollers, but it's better to have maybe like 3. And they're the ESP8266 type that are really common and cheap to buy. So what is the Chicken Man game? Oh boy. All right. So we might have over-engineered this game a little bit right before I get into it. Let's get started. First off, I had a friend who is represented by the chicken online in many places, who I was trying to convince to help us on this game because he's a microcontroller expert, but he's also a computer science student and was super busy. So in spite of me naming the game to try to lure him into helping, the majority of the work was actually done by my friend Brandon, who currently works with me on the Nugget project. So the overview of this game was a WPA cracking game for CTS and hackerspaces, but here's our restriction. We can't do deauthing. So how do you make it so you can have a competitive game with multiple stages doing Wi-Fi hacking using just some Raspberry Pis and microcontrollers? Oh boy, well, me and my friend Brandon sure did complicate this needlessly. Let's go into it. So the purpose of the game is to have these ultra low cost microcontrollers provide an easy way to generate handshakes to crack and get increasingly difficult passwords for players to attempt to brute force on their Linux computers. As they get the passwords, they can actually log into the access points that these microcontrollers are making and hit a button that turns the microcontroller their team's color. So in this game, we have the chickens, and then we have the Chicken Man. So the chickens are microcontrollers that are creating access points or Wi-Fi networks, and they're called something like chicken easy or chicken medium or chicken hard. And that refers to the strength of the password protecting the network. So what players do while playing the game is they try to break into each chicken and then turn that chicken their team's color. And that chicken lays a certain amount of eggs or points every minute. And once their team captures that chicken, those eggs are added to their team's overall score. So in the background, we have a big NeoPixel strip that is a ratio of points. It basically starts even with red and blue team, so red and blue split. And throughout the game, a device called the Chicken Man, for which the game is named, visits each one of the chickens and collects the eggs. Now, if your team has captured that chicken, then those eggs go to your team and you start to advance and win the game. After 15 minutes, the game ends. Kind of complicated to explain, but basically each access point is generating points, and then there's a collector that goes around and picks up the points every minute or so, but in doing so also creates a Wi-Fi handshake. So each team can basically follow the Chicken Man around, capture a handshake, and then brute force it on their computer, and then log in and press the button in order to automatically start getting points for their team. So they can also target a harder chicken and hope to get lucky and end up getting a lot more points earlier in the game. Overall, it's also fun because each time you capture one of the chickens, it reboots with a more difficult password so that the other team can attempt to steal. So we really put a lot of work into this game. This is how crazy it looked when we put it together. We had a lot of Raspberry Pis because we had like 30 students that were playing this, and we connected it all through a lab in the Pasadena Computer Science department that we then had to use SSH in a Chrome browser to log into. So this was very primitive, but we ended up doing this in more dignified fashions at a variety of different, let's see, we did it at Layer 1, and I think we also did it at another hacker conference in Los Angeles. But either way, it was a lot of fun. If you want to try something that's open source, that's a dual style game that might be, again, a little complicated, might take a little bit to explain the rules, but there's pretty good documentation. Here is the actual game that we played. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it. And the point is, like, you start to learn how brute forcing passwords work, and you also start to learn how Wi-Fi security works. So this was a monumental project. This was not easy to do. And I am not planning on doing this game necessarily anytime soon. So if you want to try it out, again, this is open source, and the this cool little Wi-Fi interface lets you log in and slam the button as soon as you crack the password, which is pretty cool. People seem to enjoy it. And although there were a couple hiccups, this project is probably one of the most popular that I've done. It has like 20 forks and 158 stars on GitHub. So obviously other people have gotten some value out of this project. We try to keep up with issues, but obviously, like, I don't have infinite time to work on this, and I'm not the more technical one on this. Yes, so that's one of the games that I've created for people who want to try out just an open source project that allows you to do like a game if you're doing like a cybersecurity meetup or if you're a cybersecurity group. All right. I just got here and the talk is chickens. This requires a cryptozoology expert. Well, Michael is currently still on his cryptozoology sabbatical, although I hear that he may be working for a local cybersecurity company, maybe making some content and maybe doing some other stuff relatively soon. So we will see. But he is currently still tracking the Squatch. So until we hear back from him, we can only wish him luck and assume he's still alive. All right. So I'm also being invited to Sweden. So the last time I went through Sweden was when I was going to Norway to work with the Norwegian Institute of Journalism on doing a super, super fun like OSINT research training seminar. And I was so sick because I found out that my body hates international travel. So I associate that with being very ill. But I would love to come back under better terms and maybe some Dramamine so that I don't get sick on the airplane. Frankly, I had such a fun time in Oslo, and I have really wanted to visit hacker spaces in other areas because one of my favorite hacker spaces is actually in Oslo. Where are they? I kind of want to show how cool their space is. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is Hackeriet. I showed up barely announced, and somebody just like let me in the front door, and I kind of like freaked out the person who was running it by just already being in the building. But it is such a cool space. They have a lot of really interesting projects, like a string of LED lights that have a public IP address. So if you scan the ports on the light, anytime it gets a scan, it like that makes the LEDs like twinkle. I got to learn about the way that Norway was created and how it was one of the most like peaceful like births of a country in the last like 100 years. It was just like super cool, like learning about all this like cultural stuff from people who are in the hacker community and almost feeling like I was in like an embassy of hacker culture. I also really enjoyed some of the like C3 like spaces that I got to visit when I was in Germany. But I would say just for pure aesthetics and like hacker vibe, like I have to say that Hacker Yet is one of my like favorite spaces. And also their logo was so incredibly cool. It is a highly prized sticker. Anytime I see someone who has one of these stickers, I know that they've either like been to also like in or encountered somebody from that hackerspace. So just have to give them a shout out again. Like they were absolutely amazing, and I got to sit down and talk a little bit about hacker culture in other countries. So for me, like I'm in the United States, like we don't trust authorities. Like I live in like a state that like definitely doesn't trust authority and is like kind of way out there. So like going to a culture that has high confidence in their authorities and having the fundamental question be like, why question authority, or like why, like, you know, to like get close enough to breaking these rules that it could be, you know, it could get people in trouble. Like what's the point of it when we have like very little corruption and very high like trust in our authorities? And I kind of had never thought of that before. It was like a really interesting point that like some hackers from other cultures might not be as motivated in some ways to do the kinds of things that, you know, get you in trouble, for example. And one of my other hacker friends, Shota Shinogi from Japan, mentioned when I did an interview with him that it was kind of similar in Japan, where like there's not as many hackers because like those sorts of activities are not as encouraged or seen as like cool or interesting as they are in some other cultures. Like in the United States anyway, it's really easy to attract people to cybersecurity because hackers are cool. They're perceived to have like interesting powers and like be able to fight computers or whatever. But you know, in Norway, it seemed as though at least like the perception was that some of the more like risque things that hackers are just expected to do in the United States are just like not as intuitive or like not as logical to do. It's really interesting. So I don't actually know where that podcast is, but I imagine it's there somewhere. But I just wanted to, I just wanted to mention that. I really enjoy going to, oh yes, it is a Q&A session. I just wanted to mention that if you're ever going to a new place and you're a hacker, you've been to a hacker conference, you have hacker stuff that you do or enjoy, drop in on a makerspace or hackerspace. Like hackerspaces obviously are a little easier to explain yourself, but like I remember I got stranded in like Munich after the C3 conference because of like a scheduling issue, and I was just there for a week, and I just dropped in on their local C3 chapter and offered to teach a class on just something I knew. I had extra hardware with me, so I just taught a little class, and like everybody was super friendly and super nice. I got instantly to know what people's specialties were. They showed me like the projects they'd worked on for their C3 camps. Like it felt like I was visiting an embassy full of people who understood me and were able to plug me into the local culture. That's kind of what the the hackerspace in Oslo did. It gave me like a context for like how hackers interact with that particular culture and that particular country. So if you have a chance to visit makerspaces, hacker spaces, that sort of thing, when you're like out going somewhere that you've never been before, like I highly recommend it, especially if you can support them. Like I like to lend my expertise if I can run a class with them and like bring in a lot of new people to like show them the space and get to demonstrate that, like, you know, if you like this stuff, there's more stuff going on. That's often a good way to support them, or even just by taking classes or otherwise like making sure they can make their rent. Hacker spaces are notoriously bad at managing their finances. It's just hard, you know, when you have people who are volunteers or it's a trust-based system. So you tend to either find systems that are like, uh, they're either, it's difficult. Like you either find a makerspace that is more like reluctant to do like hacker stuff, but is more kind of locked down and has like a big sponsor, or ones that are entirely member run and have a really hard time like making money sometimes. So if you can do anything to help your local hacker space, like they can almost always use it. You know, like what's nice is in Europe anyway, the C3 organization will give you like a playbook of how to run your hackerspace or makerspace so that it doesn't fail from internal strife, like, you know, billing stuff or like other issues that kill other hackerspaces. When I went to Seattle, we went to a makerspace that actually had a booklet of like how to make your own makerspace that they wanted to share with anybody else who wanted to, you know, go through building the same thing without the same pain points of losing, you know, some of these other spaces that could have been avoided. I just kind of hope that style of like helping new makerspaces, helping new like hackerspaces picks up more in the United States, because it was one thing that I really liked about the European hackerspaces was how much support they got from a network of other people that had experience in making successful spaces. All right, so let's see if there's some other questions. Europeans are very peaceful people. Just look at their history. Yes. Thank you. Europe is by far the most peaceful continent. Thank you for mentioning that. Um, yes. All right. So what else do I have to share? Oh, right. So all right, let's go back to games. So I have a lot of nonsense repositories, but there are some good ones. So one of them is going to be the Wi-Fi Duel, and this is something that I'm reviving for the RSA conference. So I believe this is the one that I'm going to be going live with. So if you take 2 of the new D1 minis with these I2C ports, you can connect them together and then play this relatively simple game. So what does this do? Well, all right, let's say that we don't have the ambition or the insanity to attempt the Chicken Man game. We're scared, because reasonably so. The Chicken Man game is quite the endeavor. There's a lot going on. Well, we can do the Wi-Fi Duel game to achieve the same effect, which is basically making a changeable password for a Wi-Fi network that is generating handshakes like roughly every like 10 to 20 seconds. So that means that we can have 2 people on Raspberry Pis that are trying to crack the password, and as soon as one of them gets it, they win that round, and we can basically send a new password manually to this microcontroller, and it'll reset the game. Very cool. That means we can just pick from a list. I actually had a bash script that would just pick a password from the list, start this, and then send over the password, and I could run this game in an automated way. Each round, it would have a different password. Super cool, right? So this is a really simple way of teaching people about password hacking that doesn't require the setup of the Chicken Man game. We basically took the best part of the Chicken Man game, and we got rid of the chickens, the Chicken Man, and the eggs, and a lot of other stuff. We really simplified this. So again, this is just a simple Wi-Fi duel. It allows 2 teams to play against each other, and generally it has been whoever gets the point first wins, like whoever gets the password first wins. But I believe there's also an access point where you can log in and like, get like victory. So pretty simple, very easy to play Wi-Fi hacking duel game that is simple enough for like makerspaces or other places that don't want to piss off the IT administrator by teaching students about deauthentication in order to get a handshake. The big challenge of teaching about password cracking is like typically you use a deauthentication attack to kick a device off of a Wi-Fi network and generate a handshake. But if you're teaching a bunch of kids, or if you're teaching in a restricted area where they don't want you firing off packets that could disconnect random legacy services that might be super important, then you need to design a game that doesn't involve any of that stuff. And that's what we did. So highly encourage people to check this out. It was a triumph, I believe. And I do believe that the original version, I also have some bash scripts that are useful for like setting up the game, although it can always just be done manually by just typing in a password. So I try to make these games oh, yes. Can we try to make this early? This was very valuable for me, but I need to go to sleep now. Come back for the replay. But yes, I agree. It sucks not being able to answer all your questions. Make sure to leave any questions you have, though, so I can answer them next week. And I will consider that Discord community, because I feel like a question section where I just go through and answer all those, that would be a pretty good way of me not having to go through like a whole YouTube like channel and like look at all the videos and see if there's any questions. So I agree. That would be good. Yeah, so if you are on Amazon, you can see these are the new, I think they're the V4 D1 minis. These are really easy to find. They're relatively cheap. You just need 2 of them and then an I2C cable to connect them together. Once you connect them together, then you should be able to play this game really easily. So it's like for $10, you can start generating Wi-Fi passwords over and over and over continuously, and then also easily change them. Now, I also made an even easier version of this, which is basically a single D1 mini that plays out the traffic of a device connecting to a Wi-Fi network. So it basically mimics, or it's a canned recording of a Wi-Fi handshake that just plays over and over and over. But it turns out it's super hard and annoying to generate those like on the fly. So it basically has the Wi-Fi password baked into it. And once you play the game once, it's like not fun anymore. So while that game does exist and it is possible, I choose to work with this one instead. I will say that as a one-off challenge or something that people can work on to like kind of like solve, the fact that you can use a single D1 Mini to record Wi-Fi traffic and then play it back is also really incredible, and something that if you're into electronics like this, you should maybe consider, because there could be other use cases for that, like intercepting a flag that's like being played over and over and over or something like that. So really cool stuff. Yeah, like actually if you add a couple of, not to give anyone some ideas, but if you add a couple extra packets, like an encrypted packet that has a flag in it, that's like base 64 encoded, you could have a whole challenge that's just one D1 Mini playing like a recorded Wi-Fi handshake and then sending a packet encrypted with that key that the student would need to get the Wi-Fi handshake, crack the password, intercept the packet, like take the base 64 flag and then base 64 it in order to like pass the challenge. Seems like a couple hours of content, honestly. Like I might just do that. Note to self, when watching this and editing, write down that I should make that game because it was smart. Okay, thank you, everyone. Can you show any hacking tutorials? Yeah, so that was kind of my whole thing. That's what led me to here. So if you check out the Nullbyte channel or the Hack5 channel, and also more recently the Retia, Retia channel, that's my personal channel that has been the team behind all these other channels the entire time. Retia, that's been me. So if you, and some people prefer to pronounce it Retia. I'm cool with that. You can do either one, whichever you find more appealing. But yeah, so that's the team that's kind of been behind producing the Nullbyte and Hack5 channel. So if you want to check out the Redia channel, we will have more tutorials, but you can also check out the hundreds of videos that I made on Nullbyte. And also on the Varonis website, there's a number of different tutorials I've made on doing some of the more unique attacks, like the Beacon Swarm attack that I did some research to create. So yeah, there are some good resources there. All right, so looking for some other questions. A couple of people want the link to the repo for the Chicken Man game. Yeah, sure. Although if you Google Chicken Man game, I can't imagine that too much other stuff is going to pop up, But I will drop it in the chat. Just give me a little bit. If you go, so my name on GitHub is Skika. This is somebody invited me to Sweden. Like, tell me what it means. Tell me what it means if you want me to come to Sweden. But it's funny because some people on my team thought that this meant many other things, but it actually means something in Swedish. It's from a movie that I like. That's all I'll give you. So yeah, there are a number of different games that I've created that are also dug in here, but one of them is the damn vulnerable nugget. So if you've ever heard the words damn vulnerable before in cybersecurity, it generally means something that is deliberately vulnerable and is designed to like be attacked. So man, I have a lot of stupid stuff here. Sorry, yes, I make a lot of, I have an organization problem. Oh, here we go. So by the way, this is the ESP8266 WPA2 handshake. This is the project that you should look for in my repository if you want to do that single D1 Mini, just saying like a password over and over. This one was a brilliant idea, I have to say. Like, because I was just thinking, like, if it's possible to send arbitrary packets on this thing, can we just record traffic and play it back? And Spacehoon was able to actually make that happen. So credit to him for coming up with a way of basically making one ESP8266 mimic the traffic of two devices to make it possible to run a very, very, very simple one-time game based on this. So yeah, if you want to expand on this, note to self, expand on this, then this is kind of the framework for being able to do that. Although I just leaked the password for the whole game and it's really a pain to change. So I did include the process that of how you would actually do this. And also a little walkthrough of the game. So this was a fun game that I did. Again, ESP8266 WPA2 handshake under my GitHub repo. I'll drop these links when I go through later and add chapters as well. So yes, you should be able to find that. So where's my vulnerable nugget? I have to find him. There's a lot of stuff in here. Oh, here we go. My first commit. Help. How do I use GitHub in 2018? That's great. All right. Well, trust me when I say that there is a what? Okay, well, somewhere there's a vulnerable nugget in here. I guess I'll have to find it later. But the idea is that you can also flash a vulnerable web application, and that allows you to attack a nugget that is just set up to like react to your attack. It won't get mad at you if you accidentally attack something else, and also has the ability to create its own network. Sorry, I'm just scrolling endlessly. I can't believe I can't find it. My projects are a mess. Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong repo. No, not in this user. I think I have to do a different GitHub organization. There we go. There we go. All right, so I think it's buried in here somewhere. I do want to mention this because it is a fun project. Is it? Where? There it is. I'm not crazy, you guys, I promise. I'm sorry that took so long. Okay, so the damn vulnerable nugget is one of my favorite things I've made in the last year or so. It is a deliberately vulnerable cat fancy, I believe, login, where this will connect to Wi-Fi. It'll create its own network. I even made a video on how to install this here, and it allows you to use OWASP Zap or Burp Suite to learn a little bit about web application hacking. So that's really cool because frankly, I made this purely because I was mad that the Portswigger Labs website went down and wasn't working. And I wanted to make a YouTube video for, I think it was for Hack5, about how the proper way to get started with web application hacking, because it seemed really fun and cool. So I couldn't do that because, their cloud hosted service wasn't working. So I decided to make my own. So I used CircuitPython to create a WSGI web server, a web server gateway interface server. And I knew very little about it, but Adafruit had really great documentation and helped me get started. And I made a login page that was vulnerable. And the point here was being able to use the available tools to identify a weakness in a login form and then exploit it using automated tools. So what happens when you actually, here we go. Video unavailable. The video is private. Oh, well. Yeah, so what happens when you do this is you actually end up logging into a web application that makes the eyes light up and start going crazy. And it will basically let you know that you've succeeded at the game. It lights up. It gives you confirmation from its crazy eyes that this is something that you've successfully solved. So yeah, this was a lot of fun to make. If you want to try a vulnerable application that won't randomly go down during your event or something, then this is something that also can be solved with Python. And that I think is really cool. All right. Hey, so Noyce has also been saying that he's been flipping out recently. So I would say that is probably something you should do. I've seen from the Flipper locator maintained by our good friend Make It Hacken has been reporting all sorts of Flipper restocks. So there's a number of different things you can do with Flipper that are immediately cool and useful. I would say the fact that it has a really cool IR library, the fact that it can open Tesla gas caps, and the fact that it can sometimes clone NFC cards are the strongest features by far. So I find that this is super beginner friendly, and there are some blocking points though. I find that it can't reliably always crack handshakes, or sorry, not handshakes, crack the key that's used to encrypt those NFC cards. So often, even if I'm doing everything right and I'm following the instructions, I'm not able to actually clone some cards consistently. I was able to clone a card once, and then I wasn't able to clone it a second time, even following the exact same procedure. So I'm not really sure what was going on with that. But aside from a little bit of inconsistent experience, I find that the core features are pretty fun to use. And watching, actually, I would say capturing a radio signal, like a doorbell or something like that, definitely something that you should try out if you haven't done it before. So let me give you an example of why I think the Flipper is cool. You can go ahead and take just a random radio emission, and there's a mode you can put it into where it's just listening for strong radio signals, and it buzzes when it hears one. So I was walking into a coffee shop, and it buzzed suddenly, and I was able to detect oh, that's interesting. I can actually tell that there's a motion sensor right here, and that it's broadcasting on this frequency. So next I was all right, well, I'll set this to listen. And then I triggered it again, and I was able to capture that radio signal. And I was well, that's interesting. I wonder if I can just replay it. And sure enough, I did. And it started ringing the doorbell at the other side of the coffee shop. So that's what I really like about Flipper is you can walk around and you can kind of experience the world and find that all of a sudden, this thing actually is hackable or interactable with. And most of the time it doesn't provided you are being respectful and you're not causing chaos. You can learn a lot about access control and what things around you use good security and what kind of security they use and actually like get hands-on with it, I think that it's like, frankly, a really, really great tool for beginners. And they have been running into some problems. The fact that they are banned from Brazil is definitely the downside to their business model. So like what exactly is their business model? Well, if you've been on like TikTok or if you've been on YouTube, you've almost definitely seen like the flipper being used to cause some sort of chaotic thing because it's cool, like it causes a big effect. It's a small device, big effect. It feels like magic. The problem is if you have like no guardrails, and people can use it to be highly disruptive, then it can unfortunately get the reputation of being a criminal tool. And that's what Brazil has taken a stance on and said, hey, like the flipper has now been seen in so many criminal acts that we are sure that this thing would cause more chaos than benefit because it lowers the bar to the point that anybody can cause these highly disruptive events. And that's kind of like the argument behind like the original Wi-Fi deauthor. It's like if you have a tool that, is really, really easy to make, that anybody can make, like, is it a good thing to make it easier and easier for people to have access to, or is it just inevitable? It's an argument that has been going on for a long time when it comes to these sorts of tools. So it is valid, it is interesting. I guess we'll see how that works out. Like it might be that the flipper people have to work with the authorities in Brazil to make sure that their concerns are addressed, and like maybe their concerns are reasonable. I really don't know yet. It does suck that you can't get a flipper in Brazil. But it is interesting that I see flippers being used for increasingly disruptive stuff. People have started trying to one-up each other, like on social media, for doing like highly disruptive and borderline illegal things with the flipper. And that's like its own marketing campaign. And they've chosen to take on that risk. But I think that for a lot of companies, that would be like way too much risk, just because like people are legitimately able to commit crimes with it, or at least cause like big like service disruptions or like scenes that get a lot of attention. And that attention comes with the cost. So yes. So all right. Point in case. You can use it to manipulate traffic lights. Seen a video on that. Nuts. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you make an instructional video on how to manipulate traffic lights and it goes viral and there's no protections against doing this, then effectively everybody with TikTok can buy one of these devices and manipulate traffic lights and may not understand how illegal that is until a bunch of people get busted. So I see this as like um, or like a while ago, there used to be a tool called low orbit ion cannon, and a bunch of people would use it, and they didn't really realize that eventually, like they were actually doing stuff that was bad enough that it got the attention of the feds, and they needed to make like an example, and they just arrested some like random users, that like they just picked people and just went after them. So I'm a little worried that when stuff like this comes out for the flipper, and it's like like emergency signaling devices, if those can't be patched, and I feel like a lot of them can't be patched, and like the feature can't be reliably locked down because of the open source nature of the product, so there's always going to be ports that are easy to find. Um, the developers are going to be caught in a pinch. It's just like, do you want to be the product that is responsible for a big accident, or something like that, or criminals using it in that way consistently? Is the burden on the people who are running the infrastructure, or is the blame going to be put on the users who are in this country using the device? Presumably, they would supposed to be knowing that they're not supposed to do that. But if I were the defense attorney, I would be like, the marketing on this device says that it can do all these things, and then there's communities of people that are in the areas hosted by this company that are saying how to do it. There's a popular video showing how to do it, and the company didn't lock this feature down in any meaningful way. To me, that's like takes a lot of the blame off the user and kind of like makes the company like a lot more. I'm just saying, like, there's definitely risk here, because as you guys are pointing out, like, yeah, there are some crazy things you can do with this device that it technically can support. Again, that's true with most things. Like with the right amount of skill, you can do a lot of these things with very low cost devices or low cost microcontrollers. The problem is like lowering the bar, adding the community, hosting the community that goes through and teaches all those things is risky. It's a risky strategy. So it's clearly paying off because they're making a lot of money. But whether or not they end up having to spend a lot of that money dealing with these sorts of PR like dangers, like, I don't know. Yes, some other people some other people have recognized the low orbit ion cannon. I hope you guys weren't the ones caught up by that, because that was back, it's a long time ago. I'm sure you're on to better things. Yeah. So, so here's another one. I didn't even think to address this. So there's a lot of fake videos around the flipper. So have you guys ever seen those perpetual motion videos on YouTube where like it purports to do something that's literally physically impossible? Well, yes, like that is now happening with the flipper, where people will basically do something that's like not, you can't actually do it, and they'll behind the scenes like program it or rig it and then make it look like the flipper is doing something that it couldn't possibly do. I think that this is honestly super funny. um yeah, I think it's honestly super funny because it's become so popular that people are doing things that I think like aren't even possible for the device to do, that are going to get viral attention, that the mainstream news is going to cover. Somebody's going to get interviewed and cheese it, and then like the flipper might get blowback for something their product like literally can't do, and just like waste their time. So I didn't even consider like that fake flipper videos would be something that we need to worry about, but that's actually extremely funny that flipper yeah is making like fake videos, or rather that people are making fake videos of Flipper and using it for social media clout, even when they're not even committing real crimes. They're basically staging themselves committing fake crimes, and then posting them for like social media clout. So that to me is pretty wild. Yeah, so some of our users wouldn't play with traffic lights because it's a safety hazard. Yes, it's also, I'm pretty sure, a big felony. So please, if you do have a flipper and you're tempted to change the traffic lights, I would just say it would be a good policy, like no medical things, no infrastructure things. A lot of other businesses like might not notice if you're like ringing the server's door, like bell or whatever for like your restaurant table or something. That might be like something you could do without getting in trouble, but like making all of them go off is going to be a huge disruption and get you attention. And people know what this thing is now. Like I remember that back in the early days of Flipper, you would be messing around with it, and the game like nature of it would be enough to convince people like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just like some digital toy. People know what this is now. They've seen it. They've seen the viral video. So like you are no longer sneaky walking around doing Flipper stuff if you have a Flipper anymore. So that's just a consequence of how public this has got and how many people yeah have been able to use this to do all sorts of things. Another person is saying yeah, credit card stealing via flipper. Yes, a lot of people are under the idea that this could very easily be used to do credit card stuff. Again, like on AliExpress you can still get a lot of stuff that would do similar things, but it's always been a little bit harder to do. There's never been one device that kind of rolls all these evil things into one. And the lack of guidance on like where to get started sometimes with the flipper, like like a lab effectively where you can use it without like potentially getting into trouble, is it's probably a lot less sexy, but like it's still something where I wish the flipper had like more ways I could use its advanced features without scouring the landscape. It is cool because it's like a video game. You go around looking for stuff and like you find things you can interact with, and where appropriate you can see like, oh, can I scan on that reader, can I like copy this hotel card. That's fine. Like I think that's totally fine, but it would be nice to know baked in like where the limits are and have some ways of like learning around it. That would be my only feedback on the flippers. I wish it wasn't so like sketchy to use it, because I find myself walking around cities like looking for readers to like scan and then like crack the keys and whatever. And I'm not really like getting access to the building. I'm just seeing like whether or not they're using technology that the device can interact with, and if it can, and if they happen to have keys that are vulnerable, then maybe like doing a little bit of cracking on that, and that's fine. That should be, as far as I know, that should be legal. But does it look suspicious? Yes. Do you know how many security guards have come out to talk to me thinking I've been locked out of a building when I'm just testing the flipper? Because there's no real way to like test this thing like in a like lab or like safe setting. That's the real risk I think that flipper's kind of taken, is like people by default just take it out in the world and use it on whatever, and if that whatever is a traffic light, then we might have a problem. Um, all right, so rumor has it that it's only been banned in Brazil to prevent it from costing a Brazilian dollars. I think we're already there. It's pretty expensive. It's actually slightly more than a Raspberry Pi right now, which I think is pretty crazy considering like the Raspberry Pi is like way more expensive than it usually should be, and it actually is a full Linux computer that can do all this stuff, and like with the right peripherals could probably do just about everything the Flipper does. Honestly, like in fact, yes, it could, with the right peripherals, of course. But yeah, it's pretty crazy how this is just a microcontroller and a bunch of like specialized boards. It's done so well though, and it's so like well put together in terms of like art styles and everything else, that I think it really does yeah, it really does shine. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Flipper. I think the team is really cool. I think they've made some really great investments when it comes to like how they've built a safe way of playing a game that teaches you about cybersecurity. But again, the risk is getting banned in Brazil and potentially fined $1 Brazilian. Thank you for that one, Leo. So one question. So we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. Wow, there's a bunch of good questions came up. So let's take one of them. What are your thoughts on hackeroni as an income if you're a student? Also, I have a Q on IPs. How do we find the public IP of a target without phishing? A tool Ergeddon finds max but not IPs. Okay. So first question first, what do I think about HackerOne, aka Hackeroni? I like them. I like them. I like BugCrowd. I think that both of them are legitimate ways of making some side income while you're learning. And basically, it lets you do a lab on like Portswigger Academy or something, and then immediately apply that to like a number of different websites. It's cool. Is there going to be a bunch of low-hanging fruit? No. Like people are going to be doing everything they can to get that low-hanging fruit. They're going to be automating stuff. They're going to make scanners, whatever they can do. But is there going to be stuff you can learn on and things you can specialize in and kind of drill down on? Yes. And there's a fertile opportunity to like specialize in one thing or another, or find something really interesting and drill down on it that I think will allow you to differentiate yourself in cybersecurity. So getting really good at finding this one vulnerability. It might be a little boring at first to like drill down on that sort of thing, but getting a little bit better than the average person at finding that thing could be the start of some valuable side income and being able to like get a reliable stream of monetary rewards for doing cybersecurity stuff early on that shows future employers that you've been making money doing this for quite some time. It's really nice. So the second question was getting an IP address of a target. So typically like canary tokens, like that sort of thing is like the easiest way. I know you said no phishing, but come on, like it's just easy. Aside from that, there are a few ways, but frankly, like the canary token thing is just like so easy and simple that's typically pretty good. A pioneering researchy way that I know is possible and a proof of concept but not seen deployed would go as such. Your phone is the one that I want the IP address of. So the public IP address of, for whatever reason. I want to tie you to a certain log or something like that. So in this case, I could create a bunch of fake networks that your phone has seen before. And then when your phone connects to my fake network, I can also like kick it off of an existing network that it's on. I can serve it a website. I can redirect the DNS request to a website that goes through a canary token. And then as soon as it goes through that, just drop the connection. And for your phone, it would like try to connect to Wi-Fi. It would like start loading a page and then it would get redirected and then boom, the connection would die. So the user would probably see like a captive portal page or something that like loaded and then failed. But what we would get from that is actually the public IP address, because the person would have to then load an external resource from their IP address of their cellular data, because you would cut off the connection as it's redirecting. So their cellular data would be the one that actually makes the final request. I came up with that during a class a while ago, and I thought it was very clever. So let me know if that actually works for anyone, because I got it to work like 1 or 2 times, and I thought it was a sneaky way of getting someone's public IP address. Now, originally, I was doing that for what was it? Like SIM swapping research to see if it was possible to figure out someone's carrier via like a leak with Wi-Fi. So I was like putting on my thinking hat and like trying to find all the ways that I could conceivably use Wi-Fi to get someone's public IP address. So as a Wi-Fi expert, or I guess professional Wi-Fi poker, that is how I would poke Wi-Fi to get that result. All right, I think I saw another good question, and then it seems like we're almost done. I see in hackers and deep web, you can pay money and then they hack the Facebook account and email without social engineering. How can they be doing that? Okay, that's a good question. I like that question. So hackers that are claiming to be able to get into someone's like Facebook account or whatever, frequently would be buying breached like account data. So they would be relying on like large data dumps or other like publicly disclosed passwords or other things that would give them an advantage in attempting to take over that account. That's really the only way it's possible, is like if that person has a weak password or like doesn't have 2FA enabled or like otherwise has a string of leaked passwords, like their email's compromised. So imagine you have a Facebook user and you have like information linking them to an email address and you have a breach password for that email address. Well, just break into the email address and then reset the Facebook password and boom, there you go. It doesn't matter what the Facebook password was. So often these data breaches can make it so they have access to information about lots of users and could probably have a pretty good head start on most of these attempts. So I would say like the amount of breach data that's available to the people offering these services is probably their primary strength. And if you have like passwords that are frequently rotated, if you have data breaches you don't know about, or if you reuse passwords, then that would be very concerning. Let's see. I think that we're like that kid that cloned his teacher's badge. He got in trouble and she got in trouble. Yeah. Okay. So an example of like a classroom interaction that does neither the flipper business any good, nor the person who gets caught doing something vulnerable, nor the student who's doing it. Everybody got in trouble. So that's just a bad time in general. Do, do, do. Let's see. I'm not sure about that. I think that yeah, okay, I think that's pretty much it. So I want to thank everybody who asked excellent questions. And per always, if you want to check out the Varonis.com website, I've made a bunch of tutorials, and they also do a series of webinars that are great for explaining how incident response and data governance works. So a lot of the time in our Friday news, we talk about how these organizations were breached and how much data went missing. And if you're wondering why that happens, then you should check out the upcoming webinars. You can check out varonis.com/Kody, and you can also check out just the varonis.com website to find out when those webinars are happening. Aside from that, make sure if you're watching this on replay to leave questions in the comments. I will make sure to answer them on the next Q&A next week. And yeah, thank you again to everyone. We'll see you next time. Oh, I'm running this now. Let's do the outro.